I grew up in Ohio, in a quiet town where cornfields stretched endlessly, and the loudest sound on summer nights was the hum of crickets. Nothing from that life could have prepared me for Baghdad in 2004. I was 36 when I left my post at a hospital in Cleveland to join a humanitarian mission. Back home, I had machines that hummed reliably through the night, sterile rooms, and an endless supply of light. Here, the world was canvas walls, mud floors, and the constant threat of war. That spring had been unusually wet. On that night, heavy rain pounded the tents until water ran across the floor in shallow streams. The generator sputtered and died, and the camp fell into darkness broken only by flashlights. I was trying to calm a feverish child with cholera when the entrance flap burst open. They carried in a boy on a stretcher, small, soaked, and limp. He could not have been more than 10. Blood mixed with rainwater across his chest. A local shouted in broken English that shrapnel had hit him while he was standing in line for aid. His mother, they said, was disabled, unable to walk, so he had gone in her place. I pushed aside the wet cloth clinging to his side. The flashlight showed a jagged wound bubbling with air and blood. His chest rose unevenly, one lung collapsed, the other fighting. Training took over. I called for intubation equipment. A nurse brought the laryngoscope, its battery dim but still working. I slid the tube into his airway, securing a fragile lifeline. Airway first. That was the rule drilled into me back home, and it held true even here. But his oxygen levels still plummeted. The wound leaked, each breath escaping through torn flesh. With limited supplies, I improvised. A large-bore IV cannula slid between his ribs, releasing trapped air with a hiss. It wasn't enough. In better conditions, I would have placed a chest tube, sealed the wound, given blood transfusion. Here, with mud underfoot and rain dripping from the roof, I had only half measures. I fitted the ambu bag to the tube and began to squeeze. His chest lifted faintly, the bubbles at the wound slowing. The monitor flickered weakly on its dying battery, oxygen around 60%. I knew then, without a ventilator, he would not last. The machine stood useless in the corner, dark without power. We became the ventilator, one nurse at a time, then me, then another, each of us pressing the bag in turns, forcing air into the boy's fragile lungs. The storm battered the tent. My hands cramped after minutes. His lips were already dusky, his pulse thready, but every squeeze kept him tethered to life. Somewhere in that moment, I realized what this night would demand of us. We were no longer doctors and nurses with tools. We were muscle, breath, and stubborn will, keeping a child alive by the strength of our hands. The hours blurred together. My arms no longer felt like my own, just extensions of the ambu bag, squeezing, releasing, squeezing again. The boy's chest rose faintly with each effort, bubbles still seeping from the wound at his side despite the makeshift needle decompression I had placed. In Ohio, this would have been stabilized in minutes, chest tube, sealed dressing, blood transfusion. Here, we had only half measures, and half measures were never enough. The rain outside did not let up. Water streamed down the canvas walls, pooling at the corners, dripping through seams to soak the floor. Our boots squelched in mud with every step. The tent smelled of damp fabric, blood, and sweat. We took turns on the ambu bag. Kareem, the young Iraqi nurse, lasted barely 10 minutes before his hand cramped, his knuckles locked white. Layla relieved him, her brow furrowed in concentration as she pressed the bag again and again, sweat beading despite the chill. When my turn came back, my arms felt like stone, yet I forced them to move. The ward itself had become a theater of desperation. Children with cholera whimpered in their cots, their eyes sunken from dehydration. Men groaned under bandages hastily tied after roadside explosions. Nurses hurried between them with buckets to bail out the water creeping across the floor. The storm muffled the city's gunfire, but inside the tent, the sound of suffering was relentless. At some point, the murmurs began. One of the staff leaned close, voice trembling. "Doctor, we cannot keep this up. Others will die while we spend everything on him." The words cut deep because they were true. Every hand on the ambu bag was one less hand tending wounds, mixing rehydration salts, comforting the feverish. We had already stretched ourselves to breaking. Some had not slept in days. Supplies thinned by the hour. I kept squeezing, my jaw tight. "Not yet," I muttered. Kareem's eyes burned at me through the dim light. "Look at him. His lips are blue. His skin is ice. He will not survive. We should use our strength for those who can." I wanted to shout at him, to say he was wrong, but my throat closed because he was right. The boy's face was dusky, his pulse weak. Every sign told me we were losing him, and yet my hand refused to let go. Time warped, minutes crawled. We changed shifts every quarter hour, sometimes less, but fatigue gnawed at us all the same. The ambu bag grew heavier by the second. My shoulders screamed with each compression. Still, I squeezed. Then the monitor flickered and flatlined for a breathless second. We froze. I pressed harder, faster, praying in silence. The line jagged back to life, a fragile rhythm stumbling forward. Relief washed through me, but it was fleeting. The nurses argued in hushed voices. "Enough!" Kareem hissed. "We are killing ourselves for nothing." Layla shook her head, her eyes glistening. "He is a child. If it were your brother, would you want us to stop?" Her words silenced him, but the tension hung thick. I avoided their eyes, staring instead at the boy's fragile chest, at the rise and fall that tied me to him. Exhaustion blurred my vision. In the haze, my mind drifted home. I remembered ICU nights in Cleveland, the whir of ventilators steady and strong, the security of endless power. I remembered phoning my mother before I left for Iraq, her voice breaking with fear. I had told her I was needed. I had told her I would make a difference. And now here I was, clinging to one small boy in the dark while others waited. Was I proving her right or proving her worst fear? The boy's hand twitched suddenly, fingers curling against the sheet. My breath caught. He was still there, still fighting. I leaned closer, whispering words I wasn't sure he could hear. "Stay with us, just stay." The storm battered the tent harder, rivulets running across the floor. My muscles trembled with every squeeze. "Doctor," Layla said gently, touching my arm, "you need to rest." "I can't," I whispered. "If I let go." She eased the bag from my hands, her gaze unwavering. "Then I will hold it." I stepped back, staggering, sweat chilling against my skin. For the first time in hours, I looked around. Faces pale with fever, men shivering under soaked blankets, nurses rushing with buckets as water crept toward the cots. The world was collapsing piece by piece, and in its center lay one boy tethered to life by our stubbornness. Kareem leaned against the wall, his face hollow. "We can't save everyone," he muttered, more to himself than to me. "I know," I said, the words burning in my throat, "but tonight we save him." No one answered. Only the rain and the steady hiss of the ambu bag in Layla's hands, pressing air into the boy's broken lungs. The night stretched deeper. Our muscles cramped, our eyes dragged shut. We measured time in turns at the bag, in flickers of the monitor, in the shallow rise of his chest. And still, against all odds, he clung to us. By the deepest hours of night, time no longer moved in minutes or hours. It existed only in the rise and fall of the boy's chest under my hands, each breath summoned by the squeeze of the ambu bag. The hiss of air through the tube had become the heartbeat of this place. My arms had gone numb long ago. What kept them moving was not strength, but stubbornness. The needle I had placed in his chest hissed faintly at intervals, but the leak persisted. We had slowed the collapse of his lungs, not reversed it. He remained poised between two worlds. The ward around us was drowning in exhaustion. Children whimpered in half-sleep. Men shifted weakly under bandages soaked through. Nurses shuffled past, feet splashing in rainwater pooling on the floor. The downpour outside hammered the canvas roof without pause, dripping through seams, soaking everything in its path, the smell of wet earth mixed with blood and sweat. Then for a moment the boy stirred. His fingers twitched, curling as if searching for someone. His eyelids fluttered, then cracked open. They were clouded, unfocused, yet restless, until they found me. His lips moved around the tube lodged in his throat. No sound came, only the shadow of a phrase. I leaned closer, straining. The words were trapped inside him, denied by the plastic barrier, but I could see the shape of them. They were not meant for me. Moments later, the entrance darkened. A wheelchair rolled in, pushed awkwardly through the mud-soaked ground. She had come, his mother. She was drenched, clothes clinging to her frail frame, hair plastered to her face. Her eyes darted, searching until they fell on her son. She wheeled herself forward through puddles, trembling but unyielding, until she was at his side. Her hand clasped his, her forehead lowered to his temple. Tears streamed down her cheeks, but her voice remained steady, hushed. "My boy," she whispered, "always thinking of me. You haven't eaten in 2 days, yet still you went." Her guilt clung to every word. I looked away, ashamed to listen. I focused on the bag in my hands, pressing, releasing, pressing, but her voice cut through the steady hammering of the rain. The boy's eyes stirred again. His lips shaped a faint movement, no sound escaping the tube. His mother leaned close, so near that her tears fell onto his cheek. She read the silent words. Her body shook, but she smiled through it. "I know," she murmured. "You're not hungry. You're fine." The faintest trace of a smile lingered at the edge of his mouth. Then she began to hum, a lullaby, worn and trembling, yet steady as stone. I did not know the song. It was hers, perhaps her mother's before her, but it bound him to her. The melody threaded through the rain outside and into the hollow of my chest. I kept pressing the bag, my hands half dead, my mind dissolving in fatigue, yet the lullaby pulled me back, its tenderness unbearable. I remembered nights long ago in Ohio, when my own mother's voice had drifted over me as I fell asleep. I had buried that memory under years of training and war. Now it returned, raw and piercing. Hours slipped. Nurses came and went, some shaking their heads, some too weary to speak. But his mother did not leave. Her hand never left his. Her song never faltered. I asked myself then what it meant to save a life. Was it numbers on a monitor, oxygen saturations, a heart beating on command? Or was it this, sitting in the dark, refusing to let go, holding love against the tide? Toward dawn, the boy's breaths grew shallower, each one harder to summon. My hands moved automatically, but the truth pressed closer. He was slipping. His mother knew it too. She did not wail. She leaned nearer, whispering through her tears, steady as prayer. "You are not alone. I am here. I will never leave you." Her words filled the air with a promise no machine could provide. The boy's fingers tightened once more around hers, then released. His face eased. Though his body trembled on the edge, peace passed over him. Outside, the rain softened. A pale thread of light stretched across the horizon. His chest still rose beneath my hand, faint and fragile. Dawn crept over Baghdad like a hesitant guest. The downpour had softened into a steady drizzle, streaking the tent walls and leaving behind the smell of wet canvas and earth. The air was cooler now, but heavy with exhaustion. At some point, the generator had sputtered back to life. The old machines groaned one by one, monitors blinking, ventilators humming. The sound that should have brought relief only arrived too late. I was still there, my hands locked around the ambu bag, pressing, releasing. Each squeeze had become mechanical, stripped of thought. When the ventilator was wheeled in beside us, I almost did not notice. A nurse touched my arm gently, whispering, "Doctor, we can take over now." But the boy's chest no longer rose. I pressed again, desperate, unwilling to let go. Another compression, another flow of air. The numbers on the monitor remained flat. His pulse was gone. His body had grown still, his small hand resting loosely in his mother's. I had fought through so many nights in this war, but the silence that followed was heavier than any shelling. The mother's lullaby faltered. She sat straighter, her eyes searching my face. She knew before I spoke. She must have known even earlier, in the subtle slackening of his fingers, in the way his breath no longer fogged the plastic tube. Her tears came quietly, not the violent sobs of collapse, but the long, endless stream of someone who had already lost too much. She pulled his head to her chest, rocking him gently as if he were still only a child asleep after a long day. I set the ambu bag down. My hands trembled, stiff and aching from hours of work, but what shook more was the truth I could not bear, that despite everything, we had been too late. The tent had grown still around us. Nurses paused in their rounds, patients shifted weakly, all eyes drawn to the quiet in our corner. The rain tapped faintly on the roof, a rhythm that no longer seemed urgent. I felt myself sinking, as if the ground had hollowed beneath me. My training in Ohio had drilled into me that medicine was about saving lives, turning back death with skill and knowledge. Yet here I was, in a tent half flooded on the other side of the world, where medicine could only soften the edges of inevitability. The mother pressed her lips to her son's temple, whispering something in Arabic I could not understand, but her tone was clear, tender, and steady. It was not farewell. It was love, stretched across the boundary that had just broken. I turned away, covering my face with one hand. For the first time in years, I let myself weep openly, no longer the detached physician, no longer the soldier doctor who had to be iron. I wept with her, because in that moment, she was not just a grieving mother in Iraq, and I was not just an outsider from Ohio. We were two people holding on to the same truth, that no child should ever leave this world alone. The sun finally pierced through the clouds, a pale shaft of light slipping into the tent. It fell on the boy's face, softening his features. He looked at peace, lips curved faintly, as if his last memory had been his mother's voice. I whispered, almost to myself, "I'm sorry. I could not keep your heart beating longer, but you did not leave in silence. You left loved." The words barely left my mouth before guilt pressed harder. In war, too many times I had seen bodies carried away nameless, unclaimed. Yet here, at least, there had been a hand holding his, a voice singing him into the morning. We cleaned his body with what little supplies we had left. The mother refused to let go, so we worked gently around her, respecting her grief. When we finished, she kissed his forehead and drew the blanket higher over his chest. The rain had finally stopped outside. A stillness lay over the camp, fragile and temporary. I stepped out of the tent, the mud sucking at my boots, and drew in a long breath of air heavy with damp earth. For the first time since arriving in Iraq, I wondered if being a doctor was not about conquering death, but about standing guard so that death would never feel like abandonment. That morning stayed with me long after I left Baghdad. In the years since, whenever I returned home to Ohio, whenever I walked past quiet fields stretching under the sky, I thought of that boy and his mother. I thought of the rain that would not stop, the lullaby that endured, and the smile that flickered on his lips as he slipped away. He reminded me that sometimes the truest form of healing lies not in victory over death, but in making sure that love is the last thing a patient feels. Years have passed since that night in Baghdad, but the memory has never left me. I still see the boy's face when I close my eyes. I still hear the soft hum of his mother's lullaby rising above the storm. There are nights, even now, when I wake with the rhythm of the ambu bag still echoing in my arms. I came to Iraq from Ohio believing I could save lives with medicine. What I learned is that medicine is only part of it. The greater truth is this: sometimes what we give is not survival, but presence. We cannot always keep the heart beating, but we can make sure it does not stop in silence. We can make sure no one crosses that final threshold alone. That boy taught me more than any textbook or lecture ever could. He taught me that courage is not measured only by living, but by how we hold each other in the face of death. His short life carried a weight that has shaped every choice I've made since. I tell his story not to dwell on tragedy, but to honor him and his mother and the truth they revealed to me, that being a doctor is about more than fighting death. It is about bearing witness to love at its most fragile and most enduring. If this story has reached you, I hope you carry it forward. And if you have lived moments like these, I invite you to share them. Because in telling, in listening, we keep the memory of such lives alive, and we remind each other of what it means to be human.